Welcome to Found with Trish and Sherri. Today we have a special guest, my biological mother, Carolyn. And after years of swapping experiences between ourselves, we're excited to bring you in on the conversation. So, hello, Carolyn.
Good morning. Hi.
After lots of technical difficulties, we're here and excited to hear your side, because through searching, Trish and I have had so many conversations about what life must have been like for your generation of biological mothers, and you and Trish's birth mother as well. So I thank you for coming on and being open and sharing with us. And I'm excited to hear your story again, because it's been a while since we've talked about this. So 8 years ago, I found my biological mom, Carolyn, who just lives a couple of miles away, which is crazy. And share with us your remembrances of the late 1960s.
Well, first of all, I think it needs to be said that it depends on your socioeconomic, background as to how it affected you. There were a lot of girls whose parents had money. They sent them to what they called unwed mothers' homes, and they had lots of support, lots of family support. And then there were people like me that came from a broken home with no father, and a mother who worked full time, and lots of other kids just besides me. And I think that made a huge difference in how the whole situation was handled. And
Right.
so you have to understand that everybody's experience is different. In my experience, my father left home years before, and my mother worked nights as a medical technologist in a hospital. So the three girls that were left, me and my two younger sisters, we basically raised ourselves. My mother was an alcoholic who, when she got home from work, started drinking and took sleeping pills so she could sleep during the day, along with the alcohol. She had quite a few emergency room visits because of that. And we just had no one to rely on, no one to guide us. We were just on our own. Well, teens are teens, and we get into trouble. Pardon?
Things happen.
Yes. Well, looking back, we didn't have a horrible childhood, I didn't think. But when talking recently to my younger two sisters, I was horrified to find out just how bad it was, because I was several years older than the next youngest and didn't have the same experience. So that's what I'm saying about, being an unwed mother in the 60s. It literally depends on where you were in the family, what kind of family you had, what kind of background, what kind of education, all those things. So I was engaged to a man in the Air Force who was several years older than me. And we had sex, and I got pregnant. And, the thing is, when I think back, my older sister didn't live at home any longer, but she told my mother, they're having sex, you need to get her some birth control. She had done that for my older sister. She got her the pill, and she didn't get pregnant. But my mother was not my biggest fan. Let's just put it that way. We never got along well. And so she was not supportive at all of me. And I feel like, I felt like when I got pregnant, she said, well, that's what you get. That's what happens. Oh, well, she says, first of all, you can't live at home. Second of all, I'm not supporting you and your bastard child. Oh, my goodness, she was very outspoken. Can I even say that on here?
Yes.
But she was angry. She was, she's like, I'm not feeding another mouth. Your father left us and he no child support at all. I'm raising you guys the best I can, and I'm not taking on any more. Well, in the 60s, it's not like today. There wasn't WIC. There wasn't, the food stamp for everybody who wants them. It was, there was no 4Cs, that takes care of your, daycare. There was no support anywhere. And here I was, 17 years old. I just graduated from high school, find out I'm pregnant. The fiance is in Greenland. He had been transferred in the meantime. And we hadn't even discussed the future further than I have a ring. We're going to get married someday. I kind of freaked out. I only had like one really good friend at that time. And when her parents found out I was pregnant, that was it. She was not allowed to see me, speak to me, nothing. Wow. So I was really on my own. Seriously. I tried to find a job. Nobody in those days was going to hire a pregnant girl that wasn't married. Nobody. I didn't have any transportation. It was riding the bus everywhere. That was another thing. People wouldn't hire you if you didn't have transportation. If you had to depend on buses, that's not dependable and reliable. Even back then it wasn't. Right. But, I just kind of went, what do I do? What do I do? So my mother said, well, you'll have to give it up for adoption. And I was so naive. I didn't even know what that all entailed. I didn't know the whole step-by-step process. And, I didn't even talk to anybody. My mother just took care of it all. It was just like one day she goes, okay, I have parents for your kid. And I was like, well, can I meet him or anything? No. And I was like, well, how does this work? She says, you go to the hospital, you have the baby, they take the baby home, that's it. Well, I didn't really have any choices. It's not like I could choose who the parents was. Now we have open adoptions. Now we have, you can choose the parents. Here's an array of couples. Which one would you like for your child? Oh, no, there was none of that. Well, I went to the hospital to have you. And, they put me in a room. They said, okay, it's time to go to the delivery room. I went to the delivery room. I went to sleep. They put me, general anesthesia. I woke up and they said, baby's gone. You can go home now. I was just like, well, can I see her? No, you're not allowed to see her. Well, they told me it was a girl. So I said, can I see her? No, you can't. She's already gone. I was like, and that was it. Nobody ever told me anything again. It was traumatic. It was really traumatic. Yes. But that was normal. That was normal in that day and age. It was totally normal. That's what they did.
What did they tell you as to how to cope with that?
I'm sorry, repeat.
Did they tell you anything as to how to cope with that?
No. No counseling, no support. I had the same no support I had when I was pregnant. I had a mother who was uncaring and no friends because they weren't allowed to talk to me or see me. So I had nobody. There was no counselor, nobody even from an adoption agency or anything like that. I never met anybody. They said, here, sign your name here. That was it.
Wow.
I know. Because yes. it was a private adoption. Yes.
A private adoption.
Can you share, because can you share how that happened? Like who your mother was?
Yes. Well, my mother worked, like I said, as a med tech at the hospital, and she was friends with the OBGYN, who was also friends with the adoptive couple. And that OBGYN knew that they had lost a child and were looking to adopt. And somehow between my mother and him, they set it all up. And, she just said, oh, we have someone to adopt your child, and it's all set and all ready, and all you have to do is sign your name when the child is born. And I was like, I have no say? She goes, you have no say.
Did you
What
hear
are you
anything
going to do?
from your fiance during this time?
Oh, well, that's okay. That's a whole nother part of the story. Like I said, he was in Greenland, so we had no communication. He was on a base up there and had, I don't know, we had no communication.
No letters or anything?
I sent him a letter telling him that I was pregnant, and he says, well, how do I know it's mine? And I was like, because you're the only one I've had sex with, so obviously it's yours. He goes, well, I don't know that. And I said, this was letters back and forth. And he sent me a letter that said, I talked to the chaplain here on base, and the chaplain says that since I have no idea if that's my child or not, we are not getting married, and we're breaking this off now. This was when I first found out I was pregnant. It was like, oh, well, now what? So like I had no support at all. No friends, no nothing. And my fiance says, well, I don't even know that it's mine, so I'm not marrying you. They didn't have DNA testing back then. They didn't have any way of proving it, and how do you prove it?
Right.
I guess he didn't trust me enough to believe me, which is interesting. You said you talked to him, and I'm like, he didn't tell you the whole story.
I think also that the chaplain, according to him, I think was saying, how do you know it's yours? And didn't they have to give permission for you to get married?
Yes. The Air Force would have to give permission, yes. And it would have to be done by proxy because he wasn't allowed to come back. Back in those days, I think, when you were overseas or whatever in another country, they weren't going to just send you home to marry your pregnant girlfriend and come back.
Right.
That's a big deal.
Right. And I can imagine with letter writing, you write a letter here in Central Florida, and then you send it through the military to Iceland, and then back and forth, the lag on that.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, every day you're waking up with no resources and hopeless.
Yep. Now, my mother did support me during my pregnancy financially. I mean, she let me live at home, which she never stopped reminding me, that she was doing this for me out of the goodness of her heart, because by then I had turned 18. And so then she was like, well, you're an adult now. You don't have any rights to stay at home. I'm letting you stay here. I know I make my mother sound mean, but she was a very hard, unforgiving woman. If you had ever known your great-grandmother or her or your great-grandmother, you would totally understand that. But, there's a lot of reason why she was as hard as she was.
Right.
But yeah. So, without emotional support, it's really hard when you're a kid to even think a step ahead.
It's hard enough as an adult with resources.
Excuse me.
It's okay.
Sorry.
Okay.
Get a little
So then after the birth, did you imagine, like Trish and I talk a lot about how there weren't DNA tests, like you were just told to forget it, go on with your life.
Yes.
And you couldn't have imagined that, you would be found.
Exactly. But sorry.
No, it's
It's okay.
fine. We appreciate you being here and
Yes, we
sharing.
do.
We know it's difficult.
Yes.
But I did pray for you all the time. Maybe not every single solitary day, but very, very often. And I always prayed that you would have a, sorry.
No, it's
Okay.
fine.
It's a very emotional topic.
It really is. I always prayed that you would have a good family that loved you. I prayed that they would be Christians because I was a Christian. I know, doesn't sound like it, right?
No, we're all human.
Right. Well, but I was a Christian and I prayed for you all the time. It's funny that I called you Cheryl because I didn't get to name you. I didn't get to hear your name. I didn't hear, I never heard a single, progress report or anything. And then when you found me and I found out your name was Sherri, I just laughed and laughed how funny God is. It was close enough. He
Yes.
knew who you were anyway. But yeah,
And
sorry.
your prayers were answered because I did grow up in a Christian household and I was given everything. I know you know that.
Yeah.
One of my favorite experiences and memories from this whole experience, actually, one of my favorite memories from life is when my adopted mom came down and you came and Debbie came and we all sat and had dinner together. How was that for you?
That was amazing. Amazing.
Yeah.
I was shocked that they were willing to do that they were willing to meet me, and they didn't treat me like an outcast or anything. Do you know what I'm saying?
Was that a big fear?
Actually, yes, because I felt like an interloper because this was their daughter. You know what I mean? I mean, she was mine, yes, but only biologically. There was no emotional connection, well, until we met, but you know what I'm saying? So I felt like I was really surprised that they were willing to meet and talk, and it was just an amazing experience. They were very loving and outgoing, and
I think the eyeball is only biologically. Well, we have since learned how important and significant that biology can be, and so it's just kind of shocking. It's like you don't know you have a bigger part than I think any of us realized when we started on all of this.
Right.
It amazes me personality wise, and seeing Sherri and all her blood relatives, how many traits, and not just physical traits, but how many skills and personality quirks, and even sometimes the way she speaks, or the way you both hold your face, or the way you both walk, since I've got a chance to meet you. It does amaze me how much that biology does form the foundation. Yeah. It's not everything, that's for sure, but it is amazing how much that we have found that is a part of who we are.
Yes, I agree.
This is emotional. Sorry, I'm not usually emotional, as you know.
That's fine.
Well, when I did the first episode, and basically told my experience, and I said, that for the first year when you and I would meet and have lunch or get together, that you would cry and say, I can't believe you want to meet me, and that you're not mad at me, which had actually never occurred to me. That had never occurred to me, to be mad at you. If anything, I had always imagined that the day you found out you were pregnant with me was probably the worst day of your life. And that maybe you thought about me on my birthday. I hoped you did. I always thought about you on my birthday. And I think most people who are searching, your biggest fear is to be rejected. And of the four parents we found, you were the first one, and you set the stage for us feeling like we could continue with this, that it was possible, that we were actually wanted, and that we found people that loved us.
Well, it's true. I mean, I always prayed that someday you would find me because I would not come looking for you. I felt like I was the intruder. I felt like I was, you know, like I felt like if you had a happy family that I had been praying for, I did not want to. And back in those days, children were not necessarily told that they were adopted. In fact, it was very uncommon to be told you were adopted. And so if I had gone looking for you and actually found you, that would be a horrific, traumatic experience. What?
Right.
My parents aren't really my parents? What? Who is this person? What's going on? I can remember stories of, women who went looking for their child and found them, and the kids were shocked and horrified by the whole thing. They didn't know they were adopted, and this person shows up and says, "Hey, I'm your birth mother," and they're all like, "What?" And so I knew I would never go looking for you because of that. But that's the mindset that I had coming from that era.
Well,
nowadays,
right.
I had the same fear to find my birth family, is that I would be the interloper. I would be intruding. She probably had a life, a family, kids and all this, and I would not be wanted. I would be the mistake that she had, that she was upset about and never wanted to come out. And well, in a way that kind of did happen, but she and I have formed a relationship, which is wonderful. I think been very healing. But I had that same fear. And so I wonder if it's part culture, part personality, because I really didn't want to mess up her life any more than I already had. I already felt guilty for something I didn't have any part in,
Yes, I see exactly where you're coming from, because I know people that's happened to. I mean, I know, acquaintances over my lifetime that has happened to, that this child grown up suddenly shows up and said, "Hey, I'm the child you gave away." And they had never told their husband or their family that they'd ever had a child, because there's a huge stigma to that, especially in my age group. It's a huge stigma. Now, me, I don't care. I'm a Christian. I'm forgiven. Everything that I've done is forgiven. And I've actually accepted that. And so I can move ahead with my life and knowing Sherri. I mean, this has been such a joy for 8 years, almost 9 years. This is amazing. We have a great relationship. She fits right into the family like she's been there forever. It's crazy how much she gets along with her brothers and sisters and all. It's really crazy if you think about it. And when people say, "How many kids do you have?" I say 8. I mean, it's just, 8 kids.
First time you said that, how did it feel?
It felt weird. Well, actually, at times I had said, "Well, I have, 4 kids, but I've had 5. One I had to give up for adoption." So I've never hidden that fact. I've been very open about it, because she was never like a mistake. You know what I mean? I mean, you just happened. And that's the way, as Christians, that's the way we should be living, because everybody makes mistakes. Everybody has faults. Everybody has backgrounds they don't necessarily want to share. But, I think that's what gives people courage to keep moving along, is to hear, that these things happened and you survived it and it turned out great. So, I would encourage kids, even if you do get rejected, I would still encourage it, because there's something inside of you. There's an emptiness somewhere inside of you that wants to know. Don't you think? I mean, just from talking
totally
to you.
I agree.
I'm
and I think
yes.
I think you have a right to ask those questions.
I'm always back and
I
forth.
feel that too.
Yeah, because I did want to search, but I mostly didn't want to search most of my life. And then when I did, there was a lot of things to deal with. So I'm glad I did. But I never felt like I was empty per se, that there was something missing. But I did always feel like I couldn't understand, and I never related it to being adopted, why I just never felt like I fit in. I'm so different from all of my family on both sides. I don't look like them. I don't think like them. I don't have the same personality. I don't have the same quirks. I don't have the same interests. I don't have the same talents. And it was fine. And I have several of them who still to this day, love me and we're family. But finding, that's where the art part comes from. That's where the music part comes from. That's where the attitude comes from. I'm like, okay, I get it now. And I think there's something to be said about that I felt very grounded once I knew who those people were and who that, hi, Diogi. And who we were, the people I was from, but I don't quite fit there completely either, because I did have a whole other family and grew up with different experiences. And it's been interesting. One thing I do want to ask you is, when we came to find you and we had written Sherri and I have talked before that I kind of gave you a little test run with your shop and talked to you first to make sure you were, nice.
Legitimate.
And, I just couldn't let her jump off the bridge, without knowing there was a parachute. But when you actually figured it out and got those emails, what went through your head?
Well, first of all, I was shocked. I mean, I had prayed for that for so long. And here it was, years and years and years later. It's not like, she was 18 and it was just, a short period of time. I mean, this is a long, long time. And, when the first email came, I was like, oh, she's looking for her mother. I wonder which one of us is her mother. Because my sisters also had, children out of wedlock. So, I really wasn't sure at first. So I didn't really say anything until I asked her birth date. She says, I think one of your sisters is my mother. And I said, what's your birth date? And she said, February 4th. And I was like, that was me. I'm your mother. And she was like, what? It was amazing. I said, call me. Here's my phone number. It was great. I was like thrilled. That's something I had prayed for so many years. I didn't think it was ever going to happen, to be honest. But I put my DNA out there, and I put my maiden name out there, and I put, whatever I could out there just in case she was ever looking. I tried to make it as easy as I could.
Thank you for
that. And you just live. Yeah, you live so close. All these years we lived right next to each other.
Oh my gosh.
And I wonder, I think we had grown up wondering, we knew kind of where our parents were from and where we had been adopted from. And so it's like, oh, have we bumped into them? How many times we run into them from the grocery store? That kind of thing. And you actually did have that experience that you had at least once. But I really do wonder how many times y'all have passed each other getting gas at the doctor's office, talking to different friends, whatever. Have you, bumped into
Oh,
each other?
we had a friend in common who didn't even know it. Did you want to tell about your experience with the clown? That was hilarious. She goes, I found this picture.
And she was face painting my son. Yeah, I actually talked about this in episode 1. That was one of my other greatest outcomes of this whole experience, that even knowing I wanted to find you, there you were 11 years before I found you.
How'd that make you feel,
Yes.
Carolyn, when you saw that picture? I mean,
I just laughed and laughed and laughed. I thought that was great. I mean, isn't God funny? He was like setting us up for this whole reunion thing. And how many times did you come to Boone High School for some kind of, teachers thing, classes or whatever? Right. And here I was working at Boone High School in the front office. I'm sure we had to have passed. We had to have.
Well, and since we have found each other, we have run into each other at Walmart, at the gas station, at various places.
So it had to have happened before. We just didn't know who we were.
Right.
That's amazing.
Right.
Yeah.
Did you find that you looked for her, like if you saw people that age, or was that something that's just kind of way in the back of your mind? Because I know you didn't have any idea where she had gone.
Well, yeah. When my mother told me that she had been adopted, she said they don't live in Orlando, so you'll never see her. I said, well, I might run into her sometime. And I remember talking to her and saying that. She goes, oh, you'll never run into her. They don't even live here. I was like,
actually, we lived here until I was 2.
Yeah, she lied to me. I'm not surprised. Yeah. Well, she didn't want me to go looking either. I mean, that she didn't want a reunion. I wish she had still been alive. I would have loved to see her face when you showed up. I would have loved it. And of course, you look just like her, because you look like me.
I do.
The same features and everything. You would have known instantly that was your grandmother.
Right.
Oh, I did.
Well, and I look a
picture.
I do look a lot like your little sister, Pauline, as well.
Pauline, yes. But I sure would have loved to see my mom's face when, if she could have met you.
Right.
How did your kids take finding Sherri showing up and finding? Did they know ahead of time? Did you kind of sit them all down? How did that happen?
So I had never kept a secret about having had a child, before I was married to Don. Well, even before that, I was married to somebody else and had a child with him. Yeah. Anyway, but so it was never a secret, and when Stephanie was being extremely promiscuous, I said to her, you can get pregnant and, you might, something like this might happen. I said, I got pregnant when I was about your age, and then, it did not go well. So you need to really, take precautions, and, you should not be messing around anyway. But if you do, make sure you use, contraception, because, I remember talking to her like that. And, she said, you had a baby? And I said, yes, I did. And so, she told the boys were like, what? And I said, yeah, I did. I had a baby when I was 17. Well, actually, I just turned 18 when you were born. And they were not shocked. They were just like, oh. Of course, today, it's not that big a deal. Back then, it was a huge deal. So, the morals of the times. And you would think that in the 60s, with all the free love and the drugs you would think, right, that would be an acceptable thing. But no, it was still culturally very taboo. Nobody talked about it. Nobody.
Though.
I'm sorry?
There is still some of that left over where.
Oh. Yeah. Some, but nothing like it was.
No,
oh my goodness.
Right.
No.
You were just a whore and an outcast, and it was, like None of my friends' families would let them talk to me, see me, nothing. They were just like, oh, she's, yeah. And I really wasn't a
That is
bad kid.
shocking.
What do you think is the best thing that's come from all this?
I'm sorry?
What do you feel is the best thing that has happened to you or has changed in you because of Sherri finding you?
There went the sound.
Nope, I hear you.
Okay, yeah, the sound just came back on.
Okay.
I'm sorry, what was your question?
What do you think is the best thing, either physically, emotionally, with your family, personally, whatever, that has come from Sherri finding you?
Well, for one thing, the other kids are excited to have her in their life. It's amazing. There was no question of acceptance. It was just like, oh, now you have another sister. Cool. And then once they got to know her, they just put her right in the sibling group. They have these little once a month they get-togethers, and they would just, yep, come on, you're one of us now. It was amazing how accepting they were. But you have to realize our family consists of 3 adopted children, 1 from a previous marriage, 3 with my present husband, and Sherri. It was like his, hers, theirs, ours. Nobody cared. Everybody was treated the same.
That's wonderful.
Well, that's just the way we are. Very accepting.
Well, and still, like from the very first Christmas, I got the text that was, okay, guys, the way Carolyn does Christmas is she wants you to send her an Amazon link of what you want, and every kid gets a certain amount. You can either spend it on your family or you can spend it on yourself, but this is how much you get. Like, it was just like immediate, like you're one of us. And this last Christmas, after Oliver would have been a little bit over a year last Christmas, all of us were together at Denver's house. The presents were up to the ceiling. It was great. It's amazing.
Sherri always wanted a huge family.
Well, you got one.
Oh, yeah, she did. Do you feel like there's a place that I always wonder if, like, that mistake feeling of having something missing, or do you feel any comfort in knowing that she turned out okay? How does I don't even know exactly the question to ask, but
I know what you're asking, though. There was always a missing spot. There was always something missing in my life. And I could tell, even when you had to fill out a form, how many children do you have? I felt like I was lying all the time, for not adding her in there. But then if I did, people would say, well, where's the other one? What do you mean? Well, you know what I'm saying? So it was always part of me. It was always part of me. And I always, like I said, I prayed for her a lot. So yes, there was a piece of me missing for all those years too. It was like a puzzle piece that was missing and just got snapped into place, and then the picture was complete.
Wow, that's great.
I think it's really interesting listening to adopted people's stories of reunion, and we feel that same way. Like that's how I would describe how I had felt before I found you. And to hear you say it the same way is really interesting, and the best I could have hoped for with a reunion, because the 3 of us know that's not what I found with my biological dad. I mean, his initial reaction was, I'm happy to hear you're okay. I've thought about you all these years, but please be quiet. Don't contact anybody. Like, he wanted to know me, but he didn't want me in his life.
Yeah, I find that very sad, because there's a piece of his life missing and he just doesn't know it. Right. Do you know what I mean? It's like he doesn't realize there's a piece missing. And I think that's I think that's common in, I don't know. I've talked to some other women who have been in this situation where, they had a child out of wedlock, and then, their whole life has been like mine. You have a complete life. It's not like your life is lacking in any way, but there's this puzzle piece missing, and I've talked to other women, and a lot of them say the same thing. I just wish I knew that they were safe. I wish I knew that they were whole. I wish I knew, that there's that part. It's
that
like
very comforting to you was it comforting to you when you found that Sherri had a good life and had parents that loved her and
yes,
all the things she needed, that
yes, it was extremely comforting. Well, like I said before, I was a Christian, and I knew that I had put her into God's hands. I knew that I had done that. And I said, God, you need to take care of her because I can't. And to find out 40-something years later that he had done everything I had asked was pretty great, actually. It was, sorry, here I go again.
Okay, that's fine. It's a heavy thing.
It was like a miracle. It was like God totally answered all my prayers all those years. Nothing that I had prayed, wasn't answered.
That's great. Is there anything else that you'd like to tell us that we haven't covered?
There's one thing that we didn't mention is that my husband of 47 years, he was not surprised because he knew I had had a child. Like I said, I was very open about all this stuff. But when she showed up, he was like, wait a minute, what? And I said, remember that DNA test I took? He goes, yeah. I said, well, she found me through that. And he was like, this is astounding, but, are you sure she's real? Are you sure, she's not just some gold digger that knows you had a child and she's just, popping in here? I'm like, yeah, I'm pretty sure she looks exactly like my little sister. It's nothing else. That was proof in the pudding right there. And he was a little bit, standoffish, a little bit leery at first, protective of me, and of the family. We have all these other kids. He was like, yeah, what's going to happen? But, he warmed up right away. I mean, it didn't take long for him to warm up. I mean, he could see that, he knows my little sister. He could just take one look at her and see that it was obvious that she was mine. And he's just accepted her just like the kids. It's, a lot of men, if you have, if you got married when you were young and you'd lived together 47 years, and you had children of your own, and, to suddenly have this kid pop up, it might be one thing. But when you realize that in our marriage, I had been married before and had a child with that husband, and he accepted him, adopted him, actually. And then, he knew I had a previous child, and then then we couldn't get pregnant. And so we adopted 3. And then I get pregnant. We have 3 more. It was like, what the heck? 1 more. What difference does it make? It was. So I think that his reaction and his acceptance was paramount, really, to the whole situation. Because I know a lot of men who would not be accepting of that, who would be horrified or didn't know about it and suddenly had it thrust on them. And so I give him a lot of credit that he was just very open and accepting, and she's just one of our kids.
And that probably made it easier for all the family to be accepting too, with both parents being open. And
and he just jumped in, and he's Grandpa Don and helps fix things around the house. And I have to be careful not to say I want something because he'll make it.
Good. It's
I've
funny.
seen stuff he's made.
I said, you didn't get a stepfather or whatever. You didn't get a father. You got a handyman.
And he's good.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, he loves to do, and he loves to do for his kids. So,
Yes.
and she's just one of his kids. Like I have never heard him say anything that would separate her from the other kids. Do you know what I'm saying? Not like, and your kid, or and Sherri, or nothing like that. You know what I mean? It's always been the kids. Yeah.
That was one of the things I think was so wonderful when I met my sister and her family. They just accepted us like immediately. And it's like, oh, we're going to go get the kids ice cream. They asked my daughter what she wanted. And I'll be like, here, I'll pay. And they're like, no, we're getting the kids stuff, our kids. What do you want? And it was just instant. And I didn't have any expectation that could possibly be the case. And to see the way things have happened with you and your whole family has been wonderful. I mean, it was above and beyond anything I think Sherri and I had ever talked about our entire lives. It was like, that's the dream. Certainly not everybody gets it, and I know it, there's a lot of emotions and a lot of difficulties, but I'm so glad it's turned out so well for all of you.
Yes, we are too. We are too.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's all I could have hoped for would be to be loved and accepted and wanted. And it was yes. Well, this was amazing. Thank you so much for coming and sharing and just like bearing your soul. We really do. And it was nice for me to hear it again. So thank you.
Hopefully it will be a stepping stone for someone else, that they see the possibilities and that they'll, take that step.
Right.
Well, we would love to have you on again at some point, but thank you so much for coming on. We really appreciate it. I know it's not the easiest thing in the world to talk about sometimes, but we started this podcast because we think it's very important that the more stories that are out there, both positive and negative, to help people understand what they could be facing, and to hear real life stories, not the princess everybody met and it was perfect. That's just not how it is. I don't think I've known anybody where that was the case. Even with you guys, as good as it's been there, it's a lot to handle, but I really appreciate your being so willing to talk about it and share with the people that are listening. So thank you. And I hope we get to talk to you again very soon.
Okay, great. Thanks for having me.
Thanks.
Yes. And thank you for joining on this episode of Found with Trish and Sherri podcast. Please like and subscribe so you never miss an episode. If you have a related story you'd like to share, please send us an email at foundwithtrishandsherri@gmail.com, and you could be part of an upcoming episode. If you'd like to hear more about the stories that inspired this podcast, check out our book, Found Adopted Friends Search for Their Birth Families, available on Amazon. You can also find us on Spotify, Apple Music, Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. So until next time, thank you.
Thank you.